we are going to have an interesting show today, but we're first going to start off with Joel Salatin on with Alison Morrow. Behold.
I had the privilege in the last couple months of having a one-on-one hour with Callie Means. And if you know Callie, you know he's RFK Jr.'s lieutenant, and and I asked him. I said, so what's bigger, big pharma or big ag? And without batting an eye, he said, "Oh, big ag is 10 times bigger than big pharma." Now, I want you to think how big big pharma is. How big? I mean, we're talking about the health industry, pharmaceutical industry, drugs. How big big pharma is, and he said, without batting an eye, big ag is 10 times bigger. And so, your question: who's actually behind the marionette? Who's behind the stage? You know, I think it's hard to appreciate the amount of clout that, for example, the Corn Growers Association, Cargill, Archer Daniels Midland, ADM,
right,
the Chicago Board of Trade. These are massive outfits, and realizing then that these conservative senators are basically all in bed with them. And so I think when you ask what's really pulling the strings, I think it's these big, crop entities that are behind the scenes that are trying, because that manipulates all food prices. I had the privilege
in the last here. Now, we are going to be talking about something mildly different, but somewhat related. For those of you who don't know, Alison Morrow, she'll give her own credentials, former legacy media journalist who left as a result of certain mandates, who then ran into other issues as a result of exercising her First Amendment rights, who moved to the beautiful countryside of the freest state in the union, that being the free state of Florida, and has now discovered ills of cell towers and the ubiquity, is that a word? The prevalence of cell towers, the industry of cell towers, and now she's on something of a, I want to say a Don Quixotic. It's a word, I just don't know how to pronounce it, which is funny enough, a mission against proverbial windmills, although they're taking the form of cell towers this time. And we've got her lawyer on to explain what Alison is up against and what is exactly going on with the business of cell towers, the risks of cell towers, and the fact that it might be coming to a countryside near you with or without your consent. So without further ado, we're going to bring in Alison. We're going to bring in her attorney, Robert Berg, and we're going to get started on what will be enlightening, terrifying, infuriating. Let me see if I can put Alison. There we go. We're going to go like that. Okay. And this is, we're using Rumble Studio. I want the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but I seem to take the bigger square.
It's kind of nice. You deserve to have the bigger box.
I don't know. And also, I guarantee I'm smaller than, well, I know Alison, we're roughly the same size, but Mr. Berg, you look like you might be 6 feet tall, because everyone I've ever met in America is roughly about 6 feet tall.
I'm exactly 6 feet tall.
It's amazing. Wow. There's something in the food, and I don't know if it has something to do with the cell towers. Okay.
It's Cargill and all the big ag that's doing it.
Alison, give the your 30,000 foot overview. Then we're going to get to Robert's 30, just so everybody knows who the players are here, and then we're going to get into a wonderful discussion about the ills of cell towers.
I'm fighting to stop a cell tower from going up on property basically two properties north of mine, and for many reasons, the health and environmental issues, the property value issues, the aesthetic issues. We live out in the country. We wanted to move out to the country to raise our kids in a place where they could run around barefoot without having to worry about what they were stepping on, like hypodermic needles in the city where we used to live. We wanted to live in a place where they could learn how to raise their own food, to live cleanly with the environment, not against it, and to look at the stars at night, frankly. And where the cell tower would be right under the Big Dipper. So my kids will think that stars blink at night at you, and I'll have to tell them, no, that's actually a cell phone tower. We've actually been talking quite a bit about this with our kids, which I frankly, David, I was one of those people that didn't really want to raise their kids, like getting riled up about political issues or other issues. I want to teach them to love a tomato plant, not hate glyphosate quite yet. They're 5 and 3, but there's no way to hide it. We are going around knocking on doors. The kids are stacking, cans and saying they're playing cell tower now. So it's become a part of our life. It's not something that I wanted to be brought into, but it was something that just fell into my lap. I don't think that the cell tower companies knew they were putting an application in for just 2 properties north of a Emmy award-winning environmental journalist, but they have definitely won the fight that they have applied for. And so I'm not backing down. To give people a metaphor, we have a fox that's been running around our property and our neighbors' properties. After it tried to take my rooster the other night, I have started running my dog up and down the fence line, clapping around. I know where its den is. So we just basically will not let up. We're persistent. Noon, evening, morning, we're out there with the dog. I'm out there clapping, making loud noise. And I feel like it's funny. I'm fighting this on one side and the cell tower on the other, but it's the same tactic. You just don't give up. You're persistent. And I really feel like we're starting to make some headway. And Bob can explain a lot more about what it's like, generally speaking, dealing with these cell phone companies and the cell tower companies. But really, it's a story of big corporations versus the little guy, just like we talk about quite often in this country. There are, frankly, in my opinion, criminal federal protections for the cell companies related to health and environmental accusations. Your local government cannot vote down these towers based on those issues because of the protections that they get from the government. The way that it works for the resident to be able to fight back is it's completely slanted towards the big corporations. And so it really represents a lot of what we're dealing with in the United States of America right now. It's like, what kind of freedoms do you have to protect your property, to protect your right to speak, to protect your children from environmental harms? And so that's the big picture story. But Bob knows what it's like to deal with the nitty gritty of how to really fight these. And I think that it behooves the people watching to really pay attention to what he has to say, because it is highly likely that at some point in your life, you will be dealing with something like this.
Before we even get there, just so everybody appreciates, if they're meeting you for the first time, Allison Morrow, it's Allison with 1L, Morrow _TV on X. It was Fox News you used to work for, correct?
I've worked for Fox. I've worked for a bunch of local TV affiliates. My last job was at King 5 in Seattle, Washington, where I was the environmental reporter for 5 years. I won 2 Emmys. I've also won a Society of Professional Journalists Award for excellence in journalism. And I am used to interviewing and taking on issues like this as a reporter, but this is the first time, I think. Well, I shouldn't say first time, David, because remember, I did get fired over the First Amendment for interviewing doctors and scientists during COVID. So I had that federal lawsuit in my pocket. I guess I don't know. I like to get involved in this kind of stuff somehow, as much as I don't like to. And I moved out to a farm to avoid being, in the fight. I guess I just can't get out of it. I like a challenge.
Well, there's the old expression: just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean it won't take an interest
Right.
in you. And you try to get out to the countryside and avoid it, and it happens and it infiltrates. When you get out, they bring you back in. But now, Mr. Berg, Esquire. I don't know how they go about it in America. We go with Maître up in Quebec. Tell us about your practice. You are now representing Allison in this, and I've got a whole slew of questions about the cell towers in general. But give everybody the 30,000-foot overview from the people who are meeting you for the first time now.
Sure. I've been practicing law for 43 years now, so I've been around the block quite a bit. I started out working at big law firms. One of the largest law firms in the world was Skadden Arps. It was one of the firms that when Trump went to them and said, "We're going to bar you," they capitulated, one of the first firms to capitulate. So not a proudful moment that firm, threw in the towel there. But then I saw the light after a number of years and became a class action lawyer. I sued big corporations for 30 plus years for securities fraud, consumer fraud, and the like. And then sort of when I was winding down, sort of semi-retiring, my daughter graduated college and she studied environmental policy, and she was working for a non-governmental organization, and they got involved in the cell tower issue because they were trying to get toxicants out of schools, and they were dealing with fertilizers and on the school fields and stuff like that. and they wound up finding out that wireless radiation is dangerous. It's a cancer-causing substance that actually causes a whole laundry list of physical ailments, dizziness, vertigo, cancers of various types, neurological problems, kidney problems, diabetes. The list goes on and on. And so they were trying to educate people in this organization. And during COVID, she moved back into our house, and she would be getting calls about people were saying, "Oh my God, there's a cell tower that's proposed for my neighborhood, in our residential neighborhood. It's going to be 300 feet from my house. Can you help us?" And she would try to help them, but she was not a lawyer at the time. She subsequently went to law school because of the battles that she was fighting. And now she's working with me in my law firm. We're a two-person shop fighting cell towers. That's all we do. So that's how I got sucked into this. And initially I was skeptical. I thought these were people who were fearful of the wireless radiation. They were, wearing the tinfoil hats. But as I learned, there are literally thousands of independent peer-reviewed studies showing the dangers of wireless radiation exposure, and it's astonishing. And the industry itself is, they have their own scientists, and they sponsor studies that go their way. But if you look at who's funding the studies that show that there's no link, necessarily proven link. No one ever says there's no link. They just say nothing's been proven, which is not true, because on our side, we have thousands of studies showing links. But they say there's no proven link with cancer or any of these things from wireless radiation. It's non-ionizing, so it can't cause problems like ionizing radiation, like X-rays. And the type of radiation can only do mild thermal heating of tissue, and it can't cause a problem. That's nonsense. All these studies by independent scientists are showing at the low level exposure, just incredible dangers on all sorts of physical conditions that exposure from cell towers are causing, and from holding your cell phone up to your head. You're seeing vast increases in glioblastomas and other types of brain cancers. There's a guy who had a brain tumor. It was the shape of the cell phone being held up to his head. It's pretty scary stuff. So what happens? You're dealing with one of the most powerful industries in the world, richest industries in the world, the telecommunications industry. You got AT&T, you got Verizon. These are gigantic multinational corporations. So what they did as the wireless industry developed in the mid 90s, they got Congress to pass the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which is highly favorable towards the expansion of wireless networks and wireless coverage. And they were able to get Congress, because they were paying off both the Republicans and the Democrats, to put in an exemption in the statute that says you cannot challenge on the local level, the zoning level, wireless towers based on fears of wireless exposure, radiation exposure, exposure to wireless radiation from cell towers, unless the tower is going to transmit at levels that exceed the FCC guidelines. Well, the FCC issued guidelines in 1996 based on thermal heating effects on studies done from the 1980s and earlier, based on exposure for like an hour to a mannequin. The whole concept was ridiculous, and it hasn't been updated since 1996. And it was all based on research, very narrowly focused research from the 80s and beforehand. And you're not allowed to challenge a cell tower now based on your fears of exposure to wireless radiation.
Actually, before we even get to the de facto immunity, and people are going to say it's difficult to prove anything these days, or
It's
to
not
know
de
what.
facto, it's de jure. It's by law.
So, thank you for the clarity. It is in fact, real immunity for the cell towers, much like an immunity for pharmaceutical companies. I don't know that we have immunity for defective vehicles yet, but maybe that argument was made in the day. The known, demonstrable, proven, unequivocal health issues that result from cell towers. And I don't know if you can distinguish or differentiate between the risks of cell towers versus cellular phones versus high tension power lines, but people are just going to deny the health risks, and they're going to say, all right, well, that's unproven. It's correlative, but not causal. So, what is the best evidence, and what are the known health effects that result from living within the proximity of these towers? And what is that proximity as well, the proximity of danger?
The 500 meters, the best studies out there show that the incidence of cancer, for instance, or recurrence of cancer for people who have had cancer, if you're closer than 500 meters, it goes way up. There's a Brazilian study that shows that pretty strongly. Most of the studies are epidemiological, so they are correlative studies as opposed to causation.
Mhm.
Two big studies that were done, the National Toxicology study, the National Institutes of Health did a $30 million study over like a 10-year period, and it showed increases in various carcinomas, schwannomas of the heart, and other types of cancers from wireless exposure. Uh, and then, of course, after that came out, they got defunded. Uh, the EPA used to regulate and do research on wireless radiation exposure, and they got defunded in the 1980s because, of course, the pressure from the telecommunications companies on Congress, they got all their funding taken away. And now you have the FCC, which is not a science organization, is in charge of developing guidelines and following the research on the safety issues. And they don't do it. They don't know about it. They don't care because they're a captured agency. They really, you got a revolving door where, like, the general counsel of the FCC comes from Verizon, or the chairman of the FCC comes from the telecom industry. It's an absurdity. They're a completely captured agency, and they do what the telecoms want them to do. There's no independence whatsoever. And then you look at this joker now, Carr, who's in charge of the FCC. He's a total wild man. I mean, there's no protection for the people here. You don't have real science governing it. You have money. It's all money, and it's on both sides of the political aisle. Congress was bought in terms of the 1996 Act with giving this exemption, which is rare to have, where you cannot introduce any evidence of health risks in siting a cell tower. Congress put that into the law because the Republicans were bought and the Democrats were bought by telecom.
It's amazing. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 prohibits state and local governments from regulating cell tower placement based on environmental effects of radio frequency emissions, provided the towers comply with FCC regulations. Creates a de facto preemption gag rule limiting local authority to block towers due to health concerns.
And if I'm remembering correctly, Bob, these regulations have not been updated since '96 either, right? I mean, there's
Correct. And an
okay.
organization called Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense, which was Robert Kennedy Jr.'s organization, both petitioned the FCC in 2019 to try to get the FCC had in 2012 or 2013 did a notice of potential rulemaking. Should they update their guidelines? So that was issued, and then the telecoms sort of put pressure on them, so they didn't do anything for years. And then finally, in 2019, they decided, after considering, thousands of studies were presented showing correlation or causation, what have you, and they said, "Oh, our guidelines are fine; they don't need to be updated." So CHD and Environmental Health Trust petitioned. Well, they sued once. They sued in federal appeals court, the DC Circuit, to say this is crazy. This is an arbitrary and capricious ruling by the FCC, and they won in 2021. So the circuit court in DC said, with respect to non-cancer issues, the decision of the FCC not to update its guidelines or not to consider or making the determination that no updating was necessary was arbitrary and capricious. There was no rational basis for that decision, and it issued a mandate in 2021 to the FCC to go back, to look at the records, and to come up with a reasonable or rational decision. And they haven't done anything since. So for 4.5 years, they've just sat around doing nothing. It's basically dissing the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, and they haven't responded. And go ahead.
No, sorry, continue, Bob.
No, so last summer, Environmental Health Trust petitioned the FCC again, saying, look, you haven't done what the DC Circuit Court of Appeals has told you to do, so do it, do something. They haven't done anything since then either.
I want to flip this one, Allison, just over to you for a second here, because you've been on a steep learning curve since this issue has arisen. You told me about the cell towers in France, apparently, and I guess it's anecdotally because there was no scientific confirmation, impacting a dairy farmer's cows. There was I actually looked into it. There was an injunction ordered at one point in time to prevent the, to cease the operation of the tower because it was apparently having negative impacts, physiological, on his cows. And ultimately, they went ahead with it anyhow, and he sold his cow farm. What has been the most shocking piece of information that you've now learned about the risks of these cell towers? If there's more than one, just get into it.
Well, besides the health issues, the environmental issues, bees, for instance, my daughter got a beehive for Christmas, and bees cannot survive, as far as I've learned, in environments around cell towers. At least they don't do very well. The biggest shock for me, honestly, has just been how egregiously captured the government is by the telecommunications companies. I used to talk about the pharmaceutical industrial complex or the medical industrial complex, or my husband was a combat veteran, the military industrial complex. But now I talk about the techno or the cellular industrial complex, because I just cannot believe how hard it is as just a homeowner or a neighborhood to have the very basic opportunity to even address your government. For instance, our county requires that you apply to become an intervener, a word I didn't even know existed. I mean, I knew the word intervener, but I didn't know what it meant for a county commission meeting until I met Bob. And he told me, oh, you got to apply to become an intervener so that you'll get the same amount of time to present your opposition as the cell tower company will have time to present its application. Well, the deadline is 14 days before the meeting. You have to have it in 14 business days before the meeting. Well, the sign that went up, the tiny little red sign, which, let me add, every politician, whenever they're campaigning for government, they've got huge signs, billboards on the side of the road. But when they're going to tear up your neighborhood, it's a little red sign that's just like in the corner in somebody's bushes that could be like, free lemonade or something, for all you know. So you have to then become this person who is like mobilizing with days left, despite the fact that the application may have been in months ago, that the cell companies have been working on this perhaps for years. And you, as the person who has no attorney, no legal knowledge, no background in any cellular communications engineering, have to now figure out where the experts are, how you can find them, and how to mobilize your neighborhood while you're also raising your kids, running a farm, trying to do dishes and all your laundry, which is completely piled up all over my house at this point. And as you're doing all this, you realize, wow, I mean, the 14-day notice, for instance, I have to have my application in 14 days before the meeting, but they don't even have to tell me, as somebody who lives around this property, that there's going to be a cell tower there, or that they've proposed a cell tower there. They don't have to tell me until 14 days before the meeting. So by the time I've gotten the flyer, in fact, I talked to one neighbor today, she didn't get her flyer until like 9 days before the meeting. I mean, she's totally missed her opportunity to apply to be an intervener. This is just one of the many problems that stacks the deck against the big corporation. And these companies, let me tell you this. A lot of people have been like, well, you use a cell phone, right? I mean, you're like on a cell phone, you do social media for a living, right? You use a cell phone. This is not an argument about no tech or tech. Okay. This isn't like you can never use your cell phone again. I am kind of a Luddite, but I'm not trying to force everybody else to be one. What we're asking for is safe technology and putting cell towers where they make reasonable sense, where they don't totally destroy the property value of the neighborhood. We haven't even gotten into that yet. How you had taken an immediate hit of sometimes around 20% on your home value. I live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of retirees and they're lower income families, and this is their retirement. Their home, you're going to drop it by 20%. And these cell tower companies, they make money off the cell towers. It doesn't behoove them to say, well, there are plenty of cell towers in the area. We could just put some more equipment on the existing cell towers that are not going to have these ruinous effects on the neighborhoods. For them, they make their money by building another cell tower. And that's why I tell people, pay attention to what's going on, because I saw somebody in the chat that's like, I'm glad I don't live in the city. Yeah, I hate to tell you, buddy, but start looking for these data centers and the cell towers and all this other technocracy to come right to your rural neighborhood, because that's where the land is. And that's where the fight is really going to be. So you have a bunch of farmers here who are trying to, like I said, become legal experts, become engineering experts, trying to figure out how to address their government with codes and regulations that are completely stacked against people who are just, your average homeowner, and make it so much easier for the big corporations. I'm not telling people to give up. Don't. I mean, one of my big picture items that's on my list once this specific cell tower event is behind me is to go after these codes, because I have learned as your average citizen now, not as a TV reporter who just comes in, does the story, leaves, and then does another story tomorrow and has like no effect on my life. This is a story that will stick with me as long as I live here. I don't want other neighborhoods to have to deal with what I've dealt with. So there's the bigger picture of the capture of our local governments and how these technocrats essentially bully local governments and they bully the neighborhoods to pad their wallets. And that's really what that's about. In our expert report, we got written by Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who Bob can explain, what he does and his importance to this whole story. He says, he cites a lawsuit from a city in Central Florida, Lakeland, because they turned down a cell tower that was proposed and they were sued. So that's what these companies do. They say, well, if you don't give us our cell tower, we're going to sue you because you violated the federal law, which gives us all of these protections. And the judge basically ruled that the city is not supposed to give you the most financially advantageous option for your cell tower. Okay. The Telecommunications Act may say you have to be able to give folks with a cell phone the ability to call a landline. It doesn't mean you have protections to make billions of dollars off of neighborhoods that don't need a cell tower. You can put them somewhere else, or you can co-locate equipment on existing infrastructure. And so that's the argument here. When I get people telling me like, well, you use your cell phone, or I want better service, we're saying, great, you can have better service and you use your cell phone. Tape your cell phone to your head for all I care. Just co-locate the equipment, do something that's reasonable for all of us. We can have our cake and eat it too. But this is not something that makes the cell tower companies happy, because they make all their money off building new cell towers. Bob, did I get any of that wrong?
Well,
she's amazing, isn't she?
Bob, let me ask you this, because I don't think most people know this, that the cell towers are not owned by the cell companies. The cell companies pay a fee to the cell towers. The cell towers pay a monthly stipend to the properties on which they erect their towers. Why can they not share existing towers? And is there an issue about building multiple towers on one lot where one tower would interfere with another? Is there not a more environmentally friendly way of doing this?
Well, first, telecoms own their own cell towers, but the newer model is to have a speculative cell tower developer build the tower, and then they lease it to the telecoms, and they'll have 3 or 4 carriers on a single tower. And that's what's proposed here. So initially, Verizon would build its own tower, and then they started sharing and having co-locators on the tower. And but typically now, the more typical model is to have a cell tower developer come in. Here it's this Blue Sky Towers, which is a small player in the market, and they'll find a piece of land and they'll send someone out there and they'll get this joker to sign a lease at some ridiculously underpriced amount, because this farmer has no clue what's the value of the property for a cell tower. So for $1,000 a month or something, he'll say, "Oh, great deal. I'll be getting this for the next 30 years. It's found money for me," not realizing it's probably worth $3,000 a month. It still shouldn't be there because it's too close to residences and a whole host of other issues.
Oh, and what about the drop in his property value? It seems like they don't think about that. If you're going to potentially lose 10 to 20% on your property value, what does that money the cell company is giving you even add up to, Bob?
Sure. I mean, that's true. But I mean, sometimes we have like a ranch, for instance. The owner of the ranch doesn't even live there and he doesn't care. So he'll stick it there. Or they stick it at a far corner of their property where it doesn't bother them. They don't have to look at it. It doesn't risk falling on their house, and they just don't care about their neighbors. But in any event, there were a whole variety of ways it can be done. The typical approach now that I'm seeing is a speculative developer will come in, find a piece of land, get the lease, which is the critical thing, and then find a company like T-Mobile or AT&T or what have you, and they'll be the primary tenant, and then others will come. If you get the tower approved, it's worth it for every carrier to be on that tower, just because they want to densify their network. The whole business model now has changed. If you look at the country, virtually anywhere in the country, you'll be able to make a cell phone call unless you're in the mountains someplace where topographically it's impossible to provide everything here works on line of sight. So if you're in the mountains and you're in a valley someplace, you're not going to have the line of sight from a cell tower necessarily. So there'll be gaps. But in Florida, which is completely flat, the whole damn state, you're able to make a cell phone call. I mean, it's really very hard to find a place except in the middle of the Everglades. And even there, I know the Everglades intimately because my son is a fishing guide down there. AT&T, you get coverage virtually everywhere in the Everglades. Verizon, it's not so great, but the whole state you can get coverage. What you don't get is the 5G coverage, or the fast internet coverage, which is what they're trying to densify now by putting. That's why they put their towers, or they get onto towers wherever they can, so they can densify the network, so you can live stream your video sitting in your car and do that kind of stuff.
Well, Robert, I actually did not know your son is a fishing guide, and I am a heavy fisherman, and my ears perked up, and I'm going to talk to you about that after the show.
We can do that offline.
Can you explain? I mean, this is something I don't really understand either. The difference between 5G, 4G, and a standard cell tower. Like, people seem to have a particular aversion to, or believe there are inherent risks, increased risks with 5G in particular. What is the difference?
Okay, 5G means fifth generation, but the 5G antennas, it all has to do with the antennas and the transmission and the frequencies that they're transmitting at. So right now you have 4G and 5G. 3G's been finished. The 4G towers typically do the low frequencies, like the 600, 700 hertz. That will get you the broadest coverage line of sight. That'll get you a cell phone call, and that has the broadest range because those signals can go through foliage much better. They can go through building materials much better, so it can go several miles. As you go into 5G, the 5G signals is like 2600 or something in that range, and that has much more difficulty penetrating construction materials, like a metal roof, a trailer. That's like a Faraday cage. Wireless signals don't go through that at all. So you have to be much closer physically. And 5G signals don't go through foliage very well. So you have to be much closer. You have to have your antennas much closer. So your small cell facilities that typically have 5G on them will have a range of 300 to 500 feet, which is why you see them along streets on utility poles all the time in a densely populated area, and you'll see them every 500 feet down the street. So your 5G coverage is much more restricted geographically, which is why they have to densify the coverage by sticking towers much closer together than in the past.
So I just ask, I mean, make sure I understand this. 5G penetrates more difficultly because it's a more powerful wave?
The power is different. The frequency is different. It's much higher frequency. So a 700 gigahertz range, or megahertz, whatever it is a lower frequency range, and that one can penetrate through building materials like concrete more easily, or foliage, and it can travel a farther distance. The 2800, 2600, it doesn't penetrate the foliage, it doesn't travel as far, and that's the one that carries the data, the internet data, much better and much more effectively.
Does the 5G pose a greater risk because of the higher frequency to biologics and human health?
The effects are different. Some say, I mean, they're doing studies obviously on all of this. They pose different risks. I think they penetrate the skin differently. Ultimately, we believe that the wireless radiation causes oxidative stress. And the oxidative stress leads to all the problems, as oxidative stress does, as caused by other factors other than wireless radiation. But I'm not sure of the biology in terms of 5G, specifically how it's acting on the cells and the body, but they are dangerous. I've heard the power is greater too with a 5G. It's bad to be close to any antenna. I think it's bad. I've heard the power is considerably greater with a 5G, and it can be much more dangerous.
And people have also said to me, like, what about your microwave? And I'm like, well, I don't use a microwave. And what about your cell phone? Well, you know what? I keep my cell phone away from me at pretty much all times unless I have to be on it. I had my husband build like a multi-$1,000, server so I could have Ethernet throughout the house because I would wear I definitely would wear a tinfoil hat to bed if that wasn't super weird. But I think it's fair to say, like, look, we're not necessarily just picking out cell towers, though I do think that this is a problem just because it has like these other effects of property value and aesthetics and people living in neighborhoods that all of a sudden have this massive 20-story industrial structure in them. But I think, it's fair to say to people like, look, that you're getting hounded on all different angles. And so, do an inventory. They actually make machines that you can buy to measure RF around you and reduce it where you can. Just because, like Bob was saying, it just causes inflammation, essentially. I mean, that's what oxidative stress is. It's inflammation. So, yeah, stress, if, my worrying about the cell tower was not good, that causes oxidative stress. And so if in all areas of your life you're trying to reduce it, why add more? It may be true. Yeah, your microwave, puts out a certain frequency, and so does your cell phone, and so do, other issues all around you drive into town. But we live out in the country for a reason. We like to be able to detox from all of that stuff. And so I take it seriously. I take a while to make my dinner in the oven. I use the actual oven. It's that thing, you pull it open and then you have the temperature at the top.
No, but Allison, if you burn the meat, then burnt meat is a carcinogen as well. So maybe the microwave is. I'm being tongue in
Are
cheek.
you criticizing my cooking right now?
No, well, first of all, that's what makes a barbecue good. Is the searing on a nice piece of meat, which also causes colorectal cancer. Everything causes cancer, but cell towers are particularly noxious. So, on the one hand,
but I want to add, since you brought up meat, and okay, I just want to add though that if you eat 100% grass fed, so if your animal is eating its appropriate diet, it has far more phytochemicals in it, which reduces that that inflammatory marker. So there's a lot of research out there that's basically like, look, you might the sort of, I don't know who came out with all this, like, meat is going to cause cancer, but what kind of meat are we talking about here? Like, what did that animal eat? What was its lifestyle like? Because I'm pretty sure people have been eating meat for a long time. They've been hunting wild bison and deer and whatnot. And I think our problem with meat these days, especially in the United States of America, is that most of the animals that we're eating are very sick when they die. And then it should be no shock to the average American that they are also very sick.
I mean, part of the issue is voluntary exposure versus involuntary exposure.
And that's another good point. Yeah. Right. I can turn my cell phone off. I cannot use my microwave. A cell tower, I have no choice. It's just right there.
It's being forced, and it's on 24/7, and you didn't ask it to be there. You don't want it to be there, and you have no choice once the town approves it and they build it.
And another good point too there, bringing up, first off, your choice or no choice is one of the other pushbacks I've gotten is like, well, this is a private property rights issue. This guy has the right to do what he wants on his own property. So, Bob, maybe you could respond to that.
Sure, he doesn't have the right to irradiate me or to create an eyesore or a nuisance.
Well, in Quebec, there's a rule that you can't, even if it's on your own property, you can't divert the natural flow of water. So if you do something that diverts a natural flow of water onto your neighbor's property, that's a problem. If there's a tree on your property that's branching over and causing a problem on your neighbor's property, this is where that's the worst of the arguments, because it creates an environment that has an impact on the neighboring properties. Right. The question is this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, look, I am there with the private property rights people in the sense that, like, I don't want the government coming on my property and taking my goats away. I drink raw milk, which is like one of the most contentious issues in America right now. And so, I think you should have the right to drink milk out of your own goat, and you should be able to sell it to your neighbor. That's just my personal opinion if it's a private exchange. That said, I'm not going around my neighborhood dumping milk, like waterboarding my neighbors with my raw milk, forcing them to drink it. So, I think, like Bob says, I mean, what you do on your own property, okay, but this is extending past your property. And so it's not a private property issue. And I want to bring up one other quick thing too, related to the protections in the government before I forget. I also learned through this that once the tower goes up, your rights as a local governing body, which is why if you're in a local governing body watching this, you should care, because like this is your right as the elected official that they're taking away from you. Okay. So I that's what I would say to my commissioners. Like, stand up for yourselves, have a spine against these vultures. But I found out that in one of Obama's tax bills, okay, this is what we get when they have these 16,000 page bills, that get passed. It's a tax bill, or it's the beautiful bill, or whatever the latest bill is. In page 1,455, section A, it says, oh, by the way, if a tower's built, your local government basically like can't stop modifications, and like that's in a tax bill. So Bob, can you explain that too? Like, basically, once the tower's up, the rights that the local government has or does not have to stop any modifications.
Okay, once a tower is built under the Federal Spectrum Act, which was part of this Inflation Reduction thing in 2012, so once a tower is built, it can be modified, and there's no more local control over the modification if it's called a not substantial modification. So a tower can be increased by 10% or 20 feet, whichever is greater, as long as you're not substantially modifying, the footprint of the tower or the structure in a major way. So a tower, if it's a 150-foot tower, can be increased by 20 feet, basically as of right. The local government can no longer interfere with that. So basically, they get another 20 feet to pretty much any tower once it's built. Or they can put a new, like upgrade the technology from 4G to 5G to 6G to 8G to whatever comes down the pike. And I understand that because they can't be held up once the tower is built, it makes some sense. That's why they have to be careful in approving these towers in the beginning. And so if someone's applying for a 120-foot tower, the local government should realize it's actually a 140-foot tower that they're going to be approving. So look out for that and be cautious of that, because it's coming down the pike. They're going to, at some point, they're extending this thing to the full extent that the federal law allows them to do so.
Not to get overtly political, and there's no but to that. Just reading AI overview, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed July restored the FCC's authority to auction radio spectrum for commercial 5G use, targeting 800. The law, alongside the Spectrum Act of 2012, aims to boost U.S. global competitiveness and high-speed broadband by optimizing spectrum access and authorizing auction revenues. Translated into English, what does that mean?
That wants to free up additional spectrum from other uses. And in fact, like for instance, they want to take some Defense Department spectrum and National Weather Service spectrum and free up and give it to the cell phone companies to use for more expansion of. It's complete nonsense, because the great scam that goes on here is the wireless companies want to use wireless and expand their wireless usage. Wireless has inherent risks because it can easily be hacked. It's not nearly as fast as fiber optic cable. Fiber optic cable is the way to go. That's super fast. It's hack proof essentially. You don't have to. It's got the greatest advantages for ease of use and broadband capacity. There's no capacity constraints. It's the way to go, and wireless is just more profitable for the telecoms than expanding the fiber optic cable network through the country. And what they were doing for decades is charging an extra fee purportedly to expand the fiber optic network. Meanwhile, they were using those monies to expand their they were using it to expand their wireless networks, and they never fully built out the fiber optic network as they were supposed to under the law. And now all they want to do is push out the use of fiber optic and expand their their wireless network through like this big, beautiful bill nonsense. And it's not a very safe technology. It's dangerous for these health risks. It requires you to have these ugly cell towers with all these other problems that they're causing. It's not a good technology. It's not the way to go.
We're going to do like one legislative judicial element of liability, and then just I want to go back to something Allison said about the procedural restraints or restrictions. Robert, has there been a landmark case of cell tower or cell company liability for concealing the risks and damages resulting therefrom, or not yet?
No, because the 1996 Act gives them an exemption for any health issues. So all the courts around the country, in state and federal courts, say there's no liability for any health risks as long as they're operating within the FCC guidelines, which are so lax that virtually every cell tower is operating within the FCC guidelines. So people have brought these personal injury cases get thrown out.
And there's no court like the vaccine injury court for cell phone or cell tower radiation injury or anything like that.
Because the courts all say, oh, they're not dangerous. The FCC said they're not dangerous.
No, but not to ask a crass question, Robert, but that means, I guess, you're not doing this on contingency. You don't do this for class action suits because they are, basically barred from the get-go.
Exactly.
I mean, I guess, why do you do it? How do you do it? And what are you able to do, basically? Because immunity from...
Okay, I try to block bad cell towers from going in the wrong places. And there are only a few lawyers who know what we're doing in this game. And we're pretty effective.
Talk about that. Why? Why are there so few lawyers who?
Because there's no money in it. I mean, I presume you know.
No, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. Go ahead.
Well, there's no money in it, and most lawyers who are out to make a buck are going to work for Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T because they're going to get repeat business helping them site cell towers.
Exactly. So they're all captured too.
Just so nobody thinks I meant anything derogatory by that, it's the market and the incentives. You got to find clients who are going to finance their own opposition to cell towers. That's already a financial bar. You can crowdsource and whatever, but to the extent you don't get these massive payouts like you do for personal injury or class actions, it's the market is where the incentives are. And so it's no lawyers doing it and captured lawyers working for and on behalf of the powerful cell companies and cell tower companies.
Exactly. I'm doing it because my daughter forced me to do it during COVID, and I'm 68 years old, and I made my money doing class action work, so I can afford to do it. And I like helping people. It's very rewarding.
Yeah,
Allison,
Bob has to talk to people who, like, when they hear the what would be an actual fee for a lawyer that you would retain for something like this. Like, that's all they have in their savings, or not even. That's it. That's like going to the casino for us and our neighbors with all the money you have left, not even sure you're going to beat the cell tower. And yeah, so if we didn't have people like Bob helping us out, I mean, we would be totally screwed because we don't have, where's the knowledge coming from? Like he said, there's only a few people who even know. And if they, out of the goodness of their heart, were not willing to mentor us and take us on, like there really would be cell towers like pretty much everywhere, because they're our only hope. We just don't have the knowledge. And hopefully, like, as more of this becomes vocal, like we can get more of this out there, there will be networks of us. You call the bat phone and you engage it in, like, okay, we're coming to your rescue. Like, I have somebody who's a realtor in Tampa who spent 2 years fighting a cell tower, and they actually ended up building it, but they just revoked the permit. So, it takes a long time, but now she's like doing research for me and helping me out, and I will pass the baton too along. Like, I will be one of those people that's going to stand up and help people because I've been through it. So the more of us that can stick together. But yeah, like Bob's being, he's being humble here, but like he's been so generous to give his time, and Zoe too, his daughter. They have such a wealth of knowledge, and they have a spine, and so we're really tremendously grateful for the work they do, and highly recommend, if you're in a situation, look up the Bergs. Okay, where do they find you, Bob?
I'm the law office of Robert J. Berg.
There you go.
Google that and try to find us.
Some rich person out there sponsor them, please.
Well, no, what's amazing is you can't sue for liability. All you can do is try to oppose the installation to the extent you know the ins and outs of this procedure, which basically bars you to the extent you don't know it. You're time barred, or not within the regulation limit. So you're screwed once it gets there. You tell someone they need to put up a $50,000 retainer to get a lawyer to oppose this. That's going to trigger more cortisol than a 5G cell tower.
Right.
And nobody's going to do it because on their end, there's only the benefit of not having the tower. There's zero, I say, financial incentive. They only have a not loss. They don't actually stand to even potentially get anything by way of damages or compensation. So it's all just more loss or less loss, and more health issues or less health issues. Allison, I want to get into the procedural stuff just a bit. Sorry, Robert, what time do you have to get out of here?
I'm fine.
Okay. I think we'll get some questions from the chat afterwards, but this is your law firm, this is it, the correct website?
Yep.
You're 68, 69 years old, the internet said?
68.
All right, good. You're looking good. I'd say it's not everybody that has a nice smile and a good spirit after 40 plus years of the practice of law. So, I made it 13, and it was slowly killing me. Allison, just flesh out like the barriers, the procedural, what's the word, rigmarole? I forget what the word is, that you've discovered now in terms of by the time you realize what you have to do, it's too late.
Okay, so the county here, I mean, they all have different rules, but it seems like generally speaking, they're pretty much at a 14-day window. Our county is required to notify you if you abut the property, not or within 500 feet, not like we're not within 500 feet. We're like just past that. So we didn't get a flyer notifying us that a cell tower is going up on our neighbor's property. And some of our neighbors who do actually abut the property are within 500 feet. They didn't get their flyer within the 14-day window. But that's what you're supposed to, okay? You're supposed to be able to get your 14-day notification that a cell phone tower is being proposed on a neighboring property.
Well, they had to mail it within 14 days.
Okay, they have to mail it. Sorry, you have to mail it within 14 days. It could get to you within 9 days. Okay, see, that's irrational. That does not make any sense.
There's more rules than for mail-in voting for federal elections, but set that aside.
You had to intervene 14 business days in advance, but they didn't mail it until the date.
Right. They don't even have to send the mailer out that you have a tower proposed until 14 days before the meeting, but you have to apply to be an intervener, which is not an easy thing to do. You have to know how to write it. You have to get it notarized. Okay, we got ours. I'm telling you, it was like a scene out of a Bond movie. If Bond drove a Chevy truck, Silverado 3500 HD with 2 kids in the backseat, I was driving like, calling my neighbors, get to the notary office, zooming, following the speed limit, of course, as always. And then I pull into the notary office. We have to rewrite, retype up the notary thing because we got an extra neighbor to join us. And like, how do I do it and get the notary to sign it? By the time we got the email in to the planning and development committee folks, I made the deadline by 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So it's like, and we didn't even know if we were going to make it because of the Good Friday holiday. Like, how were they going to count the business days? Did we get it in on time? But I could not have gotten it in any earlier because it took me several days to figure out who are the people that I can even contact for help. And then those people were very busy. So they forwarded me on to the next people. And eventually I got to Bob and Zoe. And then within 2 days, we had this expert opinion. Well, really, he had 12 hours? Bob to write the report. So we got this expert report commissioned. Dr. Chamberlain was so gracious to just basically put all of his activities aside in order to write up the report for us. And we were able to file it with 3 minutes left to spare and got our application in. But, look, I'm a journalist. Okay. I have like 20 years of experience doing this kind of stuff. I know how to make phone calls and, get to the bottom of stuff rather quickly. But the rest of my neighbors, like they're, older retirees or they're single moms, they're families that are living paycheck to paycheck who have, working the graveyard shift. They don't have the time and the resources that I do to like call the phone and be like, hi, I'm Allison Morrow. I have a podcast where, I have 200,000 followers, please help me. So that 14-day notice window has got to go. That's a big problem that you don't even know there's a cell tower going up until after you've had the ability to apply to stop.
She doesn't even know if she's going to get the intervener status until the day of the hearing.
That's another thing. Right. So you show up for the meeting. They still haven't told you if you're going to be an intervener or not. And then at the beginning of the meeting, they decide yes or no. Okay, so you have to be prepared. And then if you can't afford an attorney to represent you, you have to represent yourself against the cell tower attorney who's going to be there and who's going to cross-examine everybody. And you're going to have to do the cross-examination and figure all that out. Here's another thing. Also, today we just found out that the cell tower lawyer has applied for a continuance, basically just saying like, we're pulling out of the meeting and we're going to reapply like we don't know when. It's just like an unknown date.
And try to have the same trickery of everybody missing the deadline yet again to not even know when it's rescheduled to.
There's got to be some kind of strategy to it. I mean, I don't know.
The strategy is they freaked out when Allison put in the report and her papers. They said, oh my God, we have to actually defend this thing now.
And they knew we were going to be on your show today too.
And they got
Well,
a
what I
world
love is
class expert here supporting them. Oh my God!
oh,
Yeah.
and all you can do is just hope to oppose the installation.
Correct.
In this, if I may, I want to get to a few of the comments here. I'm going to share our where is it? Locals community right here. There's a few questions, and I understand some of the skepticism. I want to get to some of this here. Load more messages. Bill Brown says, keep an eye on Nestle trying to steal your groundwater. Dread Robert says, are the satellite cell from Starlink or others safer, more dangerous, or the same? Yeah, that's interesting. Starlink versus 5G.
Well, you don't have the towers here on Earth so much, so they're not. You have a receiver in your cell phone, so you have a problem, an issue with your cell phone. Uh, you know, it's a wireless issue, the same as any other cell phone. But in terms of you're not being exposed to with Starlink, the receiver is nearly as badly as you are from a cell tower perspective. I think Starlink is great in that respect. Plus, the coverage is worldwide. It's insane. I was up fishing in northern Manitoba, 200 miles from the nearest road, watching the Olympics in Paris live, and it was unbelievable.
What
So,
were you fishing for muskie?
muskie? No, they didn't have muskie. Northern pike, lake trout. It was
Yeah, I'd imagine up there though the pike are probably the same size as muskie in any of
40
it, but
pounds, 35 pounds.
oh my goodness, that's monstrous. Okay, that's interesting. Suera says, I moved to a neighborhood that has these two towers nearby. Since moving here, I've acquired 2 autoimmune diseases and horrific tinnitus.
Absolutely. That doesn't
Well,
surprise me.
Joe Mazcu is going to ask the question that everybody's going to ask: where's a good place? So wait a second, Viva. Ask them what constitutes a tower in a good location. I could probably answer that, but Allison, Robert?
No, don't ask me. I don't. Just not next to my house. No, just kidding, Bob. What are
You
you
don't
thinking?
want them. You want them in a location like an industrial park location where there are industrial facilities where people are not living 24/7.
Yeah.
The idea is to keep them as far from residential neighborhoods as possible. You don't want them near schools or hospitals or daycare centers. Put them in an industrial area where people expect to have some toxicity in the neighborhood.
Well, I would imagine also obviously more isolated than not, but then the question is going to be the more isolated they are, the less effective for coverage they are. But elevation makes a difference as
Yes.
well, correct? To the extent it's possible?
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, that explains why in California, I was always wondering, like, you go to California, you see these massive towers all on the top of the neighboring mountains in LA. And I've always wanted to hike up there, but now I don't think I'm going to. I was only scared of the human element, not the tower element. Bill Brown says, I can see Allison hanging out the car, bullhorn in hand, screaming, stop the stupid tower.
Basically, yeah, that's what I do.
And then over on Rumble, I think it's just, I say just, it's not a question. It's Biltong saying, I did email Allison as per your suggestion. Thank you, Viva Fry. And King of Biltong says, Biltong is one of the highest protein snacks in the world, boasting over 50% protein, packed with B vitamins, creatine, iron, zinc, and more. Visit BiltongUSA.com. Use code VIVA for 10% off. Locally sourced beef, healthy stuff.
We eat it as we're canvassing the neighborhood. We eat our biltong, and my kids get it for lunch because I have no time to cook anymore. And then we go knock on a door and tell them about the cell tower, and then we have more biltong.
Robert, do you have a social media other than the website? Are you on Twitter or X as they call it?
No.
You should. It's a very good. It's a good place to take constant abuse if you're interested. We got a question from Fire Guy McGroin. Is this about the? Okay, so what would happen if a cell tower was to come down due to a natural incident, hurricane, ice buildup, etc.? Does the tower owner need to reapply to rebuild? I would imagine no.
Probably not. But what are they going to do? I mean, how many people did they kill from their stupid location, and what kind of property damage did they cause? I mean, that's a serious issue, particularly with the tower we're talking about here. Is it's a 195-foot tower, and it's going to be it's in a flood area. They had Hurricane Helene went through there and flooded the whole goddamn place 2 years ago. It's in an area that gets a lot of hurricanes, so they're going to have 4 levels of antennas they want on this thing. So
it's close to what is it, Bob? Like 250 or
300 feet from the nearest property line where their residences, right?
Right.
So when the hurricane or the tornadoes that are spawned off there start ripping apart the antennas and the infrastructure off the top of this tower, and all that stuff starts crashing into the houses there and killing people. What are they going to do?
No, I would imagine there's a. I would. Have you ever seen these contracts between?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
when
they
they get.
usually have $1 million liability or something like that. So
Yeah, well,
it's,
that's not very much. No, in terms of the right to rebuild, like a de facto right to rebuild after a force majeure, they have to. They're not going to.
right.
Plus, people are going to demand it because they need their cell. I mean, not to be cynical, they need cell coverage, especially after a disaster. So it would only make total sense. Let me see what this looks like if I do it this way. Okay, good. Let me see here. Okay, tower failures are not common. Okay, so let me ask you this. I think did we miss anything that we would absolutely necessarily want? Allison, where are your socials and where can people go to help you with this project?
Well, follow Allison Morrow on Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, Locals. That's all the social media. Where else? Where else are you? Twitter. Though I don't do as much on X for what Viva said. Basically, that it's just you have to have really thick skin to be
I,
on X.
Allison, I gotta say, I got pretty thick skin. Even I'm getting here, like I'm getting a little bit. They're
I
rubbing it
know.
raw these days. Here, I'll give you a link there, and then I'll give you a link to
So
Locals.
yeah, I mean, I do a lot of updates on this particular situation on social media and on YouTube. I still have my YouTube account, though I'm less vocal on the Allison Morrow account. So I have a farm account, Off Gridish Living, and that's where I do most of my farm stuff and a lot of the cell tower shorts and everything. But if you want to help specifically with this, we have started a website. It's catchy. Don't irradiate my kids.com. Don't irradiate my kids.com. And at the top of it, you can sign our petition. It says that the meeting is going to be April 16th, but like I said, we just found out that they have asked for a continuance, but you can still sign the petition. That would be a huge help. So if you will go to Don't Irradiate, that's got 2 R's in it, don't irradiate my kids.com. And at the top of it, it'll say, click the petition, sign the petition, do that. That would be great. If you'd like to email my county commissioners, we live in Citrus County, just let them know what you think about cell towers in your neighborhoods. Go ahead, Citrus County, Florida, Board of County Commissioners. And it's very easy to find their email addresses. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Just be nice. But they're elected officials and they say that they like to hear from people. So let's let them know what we think.
Let's see here. How does Allison feel about wearing quantum technology and its claim to help neutralize 5G against your body?
Meaning like crystals and stuff like that.
I don't know. I had
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know enough about it. I mean, I have people who I find to be quite smart who use that kind of stuff. So I don't know. There might be something to it. I don't know a whole lot about it.
A Faraday cage works.
Oh, I have one of those. I do, and I highly recommend that. And I have ground tested that. I have live tested that because one time I had the Faraday cage, which it's like it almost looks like a sack, like a potato sack or something. You put it on your Wi-Fi router, and I was wondering why my stream kept dying. Like I was trying to live stream it. What's wrong? The internet, it says it's fine, and then oh shoot, I forgot to take my Faraday cage off of my Wi-Fi router. So that definitely does work. And I do recommend getting one of those. My dad's an orthopedic surgeon, and he was the one who told me about those, and he's pretty deep into all this stuff too. And I think another thing too to think about is like when you're asleep, which is when your brain does a lot of its work, that's a really important time to not have RF around you. So it's like if you're going to give yourself any time to recover from a day that's surrounded by this stuff, turn your cell phone off or at least put it, a reasonable, I don't know, some people say 6 feet, 10 feet. I put mine on airplane mode and put it in another room. I don't have it near me. But turn your Wi-Fi off at night. Do stuff like that so that when your brain is working to detox and your body is working to restore itself from the day before, that you have the ability to do so.
Robert, Allison, I cannot thank you enough for this. It's amazing, and I think everybody should know about it. Robert, anything people can do to help you, or get to the website, send you an email, and you might get more emails than you want after this broadcast, but you're doing the Lord's work.
We're pretty busy, but we love doing it. We love helping people.
Amazing.
One other additional thing I just throw out there for people that may seem unrelated, but you started the stream with Joel Salatin, who obviously, like a lot of people know about Joel. Everybody was super excited hearing that perhaps he was going to be tapped for, the chief of the USDA, which I frankly think was a total psyop. I think that the Trump administration wanted us to think that we were going to have like one of the little guys who cared about regenerative farming and cared about all this stuff to be in the administration. And I just think the fact that he went with Brooke Rollins is proof that it was never going to be Joel Salatin. But anyway, that's my conspiracy truth, as they say. But the reality, though, is that when Joel talks about the corporate capture of these massive food corporations and big ag running the show, this does intersect with the whole cell tower and technocracy conversation, because a lot of the farmland is being tapped for this stuff. And the reason why some farmers are so desperate and they're thinking they can get out of this debt situation that they're in is because we have abdicated our opportunities and our role as consumers to care about where our food comes from. And so I implore people to support your local farmers, show them that their property is valuable because you are there to buy their product, so that they don't sell it to a cell tower. They're not a sell out, as I like to say now, which I know wasn't I wasn't the first person to come up with that. But it is really important to think about it. There was a woman who was going viral. Maybe you've seen the video. She was doing a report with some news station, and they had a clip of her. She was offered like $26 million, I think, for her ranch to put a data center on it. And she's a cattle farmer. And she's like, well, is the data center going to feed me and my neighbors? And it's like astounding to hear somebody say that. Wow, thank you. Standing ovation, like somebody who really gets it here. Where is our food supply going to come from if we keep selling farmland off to the technocrats? So as a consumer, like, one of the most important things I think you can do is figure out where your local farms are, support them so that they have the ability to maintain farmland. And so it doesn't become, part of Bill Gates' portfolio or any other number of these technocrats' wallets. That's my final word on that.
It's amazing. We were talking about it, Allison, when we were hanging out at the Rumble House over the weekend. Like, you look back now, Bill Gates buying all the farmland might not be to control the food. It might just be because farmland is going to be the best place to place these towers, these data centers, at the expense of food, but which he wants to build in a lab anyhow. So, he can kill two birds with one stone.
Maybe there'll be labs on the ranch land. We don't know. So
this is it's been amazing, and actually, I love it when it ends where it started. I'm going to continue on at locals, but Robert, thank you very much. It's been amazing, and we'll be in touch. Maybe we'll do a follow up in a bit. Allison, we'll keep up with the story.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.